And so here, look what happens in verse number 2. And I saw, as it were, Revelation 15:2, and I saw, as it were, a sea of glass. Let's kind of stop there for a second, Jimmy. We've already seen this. Let's go ahead and go back and look at something in Revelation 4 and verse 6, if you don't mind reading that for us, Jimmy. Revelation 4:6.
And before the throne there was a sea of glass like unto crystal, and in the midst of the throne and round about the throne were 4 beasts full of eyes before and behind.
So this is different than what we're seeing in Revelation 15. Let's see if our listeners can spot the difference. Now, what you just read is an imagery of the throne room. We see a sea of glass. Now we see, it says in verse number 2, and I saw, as it were, a sea of glass, so far the same, mingled with fire. What's different? Well, this one is mixed with fire. This one's mixed with fire. So this is the presence of God, exactly what we saw in Revelation 4:6, except for this time, an element has been added. The element is fire. Well, what is fire in the Bible? It's always a picture of God's judgment. So this sea is just like the Red Sea. The Red Sea has 2 parts to it, we already mentioned. It was the escape route for Moses and the children of Israel, but is also a death trap for Pharaoh. The cross is much the same way. When Jesus was on the cross, I'm sure Satan was pretty proud of himself. I'm going to kill him. I always kind of say this, even though it's not in the Bible, I kind of always imagine it as Christ is on the cross, he makes eye contact with Satan, and Satan is just loving the fact that Jesus is going to die on the cross. And just before Jesus dies, just the second before he dies, I just imagine him just looking right at Satan and just going, because he fell for his trap. See, our path to victory was the death of Jesus. The success that we have is by the sacrificial, substitutionary atonement of Christ on the cross.
So are you saying that the devil didn't realize that the death of Jesus was going to be the thing?
I don't think he did.
So he thought by killing Jesus, he was going to do away with this problem.
Yep, and the disciples didn't catch it either. They were all sad by that. Because see, Jim, you have to remember the Hebrew scriptures, which is all they had at that point. The rabbis had gotten everybody to hear so clearly that when Messiah comes, he's going to be a political king. That was the whole angle.
That's why That's why they didn't believe Jesus was it, right?
That's why Peter got scared out of his mind in the garden. I mean, this is going south fast, man. Jesus is getting arrested. This is not in the script.
Mm.
You know, he told them about it. If you look at the end of Matthew 17, we're starting Matthew 18 at True Grace tomorrow. Excited to teach through that. But in Matthew chapter 17, he explains to them, you know, the agony that he's going to go through and that he's going to rise again the third day. It's like they just didn't hear it. And in Matthew 18, you know how it starts? They saw the Mount of Transfiguration in Matthew 17, and they're so excited about the power of Jesus. So Peter, James, and John are coming down saying, you're not going to believe what we saw. This is like so the Messiah. There's no question. He showed us who he was. We heard a voice from heaven. God said to listen to him. Moses and Elijah appear, but they both disappear. And God, you know, they're representative of the law and the prophets. And the Father says, this is my son. Hear him. He's the new covenant, in other words. Well, they're so excited about it. You know, Matthew 18 starts. They start arguing about who's going to get the large corner office in the temple. They start arguing who's going to be the VP. Yeah, I know Jesus is going to be president, but hey, who's the greatest among us? That's Matthew 18. Who's going to be the greatest in the kingdom? I mean, obviously you're the king of Israel, but man, I tell you what, we're pretty special because really, I mean, Christ chose us. There's only 12 of us. Christ chose us 12. So we're obviously part of the administration. You know, so they're arguing who's going to be the greatest. And Jesus is going, and he corrects them in Matthew 18, and he's saying, let me tell you a parable about the lost sheep. And he starts trying to get them to understand his death. And so that's what we're going through in Revelation 15, is we see a sea of glass just like we do in heaven, but this time it's mixed with fire. It's mixed with judgment, exactly like the Red Sea was. That'd be a great description of the Red Sea. It's the exact same sea, but it's the source of absolute sheer victory and joy and elation for some, and it's a coffin for everyone else. Same sea, and that's what we see here. Jesus is the greater Moses, as it says in Hebrews. He is the successor to Moses. He's the Joshua. He's going to take them into the promised land. There's no mistake that that's his name. And so here we see a sea, verse 2, a sea of glass mingled with fire. And look what it says. And them that had gotten the victory over the beast and over his image and over his mark and over the number of his name, standing on the sea of glass, having the harps of God. They're standing on the sea, reminiscent of Jesus walking on the water, reminiscent of Peter walking on the water before his faith was compromised by his eyes looking at the large waves. Now they're standing on that sea, and it's mixed with fire, and it's for those that are saved. It's for those that are in covenant. Okay, let's go ahead and also look at just a couple of these incredible verses that go along with this. Jim, if you don't mind, Hebrews 11, verses 27 through 29.
By faith he forsook Egypt, not fearing the wrath of the king, for he endured as seeing him who is invisible. Through faith he kept the Passover and the sprinkling of blood, lest he that destroyed the firstborn should touch them. By faith they passed through the Red Sea as by dry land, which the Egyptians, essaying to do, were drowned.
So this had such an impact. This became the Passover. I mean, this is the idea of the Passover. That as we all know, the 10th plague, the death of the firstborn, that the Passover lamb would be killed and his blood would be applied above the doorpost, which, by the way, if you think about that, see if I can do this with my fingers. If you have a doorpost there, I'm going to try to do this a better way. Okay, let's do my paper. Let's say this is your doorpost. If I applied blood, which side am I on? It's backwards, so it's hard. If I applied blood up the doorpost and then across the top, if you think about that imagery right there, that would be the shape of a cross. If you're going up and down your doorpost and you're going across the top, that would be like having two crosses over your doorway. So kind of a neat imagery there with the blood. So this becomes the Passover. Let's go ahead and also go to Exodus chapter 6 and verses 26. Exodus 6:26.
These are that Aaron and Moses, to whom the Lord said, Bring out the children of Israel from the land of Egypt according to their armies.
Here's why that's interesting. Because I don't know if you guys caught that. There's a very powerful word that was just used in Exodus 6:26. But I'm going to read one more and see if people can catch it. Exodus 7:4.
But Pharaoh shall not hearken unto you, that I may lay my hand upon Egypt, and bring forth mine armies, and my people, the children of Israel, out of the land of Egypt, by great judgments.
So here we have these people that were slaves to Pharaoh. When Pharaoh looked at them, he saw slaves. And maybe when Israel looked at themselves, they saw slaves. But God just described them as an army. Perspective, right? Same people.
Yeah.
So the difference is if you're freed from your oppressor or not. Same people. Described as an army by God. This is the imagery that we're pulling from when we're getting into the book of Revelation, that these people are going to be freed from the tyranny of the old covenant. Politically speaking, Christianity is going to take over the Roman Empire in a matter of a couple hundred years. So they'll actually be politically free too. They wanted Jesus to be a political savior. He was a spiritual savior. But spiritual truth will affect society. I'm not going to rob my neighbor's house. He's safe next to me because God gave me a new heart and I have no desire to harm a neighbor. So it affects society as well. So they're no longer viewed as helpless slaves, but they're viewed as an army by God.
If you like this video, hit that like and subscribe button, and check out the full episode by clicking the link below.